Hello and welcome to the first lesson in this drawing class. Today we'll be going over what I believe are the basic technical skills you learn to improve art. They are not really based in creativity, but more about how to improve your way of seeing the world or objects in a way that you pay attention to certain details, which would improve your art as a result. Real quick, we'll be going over the technical and observational skills. And there's basically five of them, but the first four will lead to the last one, and I want to start going over them now. We'll be working off of still lives, because still lives are one of the most classic ways artists in the West have improved their skills of observation, in that because when they're working with a still object, they don't have to worry about anything moving, or say like working or anything changing, say as painting a landscape where the weather will change, or the sun will set. Still lives are you can use anything. Even though I've included ones of skulls, you can use anything near you. I use a cup of coffee from mine, which I'll show a little bit later. And I'll just go right into the first technical skill I want you guys to think about. And that is the perception of edges. So I drew a little apple here because I wanted to be very simple, because when you think about things in edges, it's a way of simplifying it. You don't have to worry about where the light is coming or here. It's just a way of thinking of what is, like, think if there was a cartoon. You can also do that of looking at your own hand and tracing out basically the fingers. There's a little do on my hand here, like that. So it's a way of flattening the world, but in a way in cutting it out, you can pay attention to other things about it. Second is space, and space is there's negative and there's space and there's negative. There's a space and the negative space, and I drew it obviously a little apple, and the way you think about space is you can think of the mark making use can either be the object itself, or it can be the object, this mass, the part of the area that the mass does not occupy. Say I do this. Let's say this is my apple. In a way, the negative space, the area that isn't being filled in, becomes the apple, while this kind of cross-hatching is the space. But negative space is basically the opposite of any line. It's the space between lines. And relationships. Relationships are simple. They're basically how do the objects in your still life interact with each other. So I'm going to ask them to use a variety of different objects, say like not the same. So I wouldn't recommend using, say, just apples or just toothbrushes or just anything like that, but have a variety of things. So obviously a cat would not be good for a still life because cats move, but for example, having maybe a feather, which has a very different texture than an apple, or having some flowers, things like that will, and when you're doing this, you think about how they reflect. Like if it's a shiny object, like say, not sure, like a gem, it's going to reflect light upon the rest of the objects. And so if you have like a pot or a mirror, that's also going to be reflective as well. So relationships are basically just thinking about how do the objects interact with one another, like what do the subjects of your piece do. Then we have light and shadow. And light and shadow it sounds simple. It's basically thinking of objects not really as just thinking of it as the way light interacts with them. So an apple is kind of matte, right? Apples aren't very reflective, but say you have, like I said before, a pot or a mirror, it's going to have a shine. It's going to reflect things around it, and also you can have how much contrast. If you have a very stark light, that's going to create very deep darks and very bright whites. So thinking about how does light play into it and kind of carving out a drawing thinking about light and shadow. So in our first assignment, in this example I use, you can see that just like a coffee in a mirror on top of like a yellow blanket. And I'm going to recommend that you either find a still life or create your own still life, or you find a reference online. And preferably something that's not moving, even if it's a photo. I would prefer say it's more simple if it's something so you don't have to worry about getting an accurate say. Say you're drawing a horse. I'd rather not do some complicated horse because you're gonna be worried about getting the horse correct. If it's something simple, then you're not worrying too much about accuracy and more about the things such as light and shadow and contour and things like that. So this is my, for example, of edges. For the assignment, I want you to do an example of each of the four mentioned skills. So we have edges, and then we have space. So I want you to think about, think almost like categorize different parts of your still life, and think how they interact. Then we have relationship, and here we have light and shadow. I'll zoom out a bit. So, and the way we think, and after you finish those, the last thing I'm going to go over is something called gestalt. I'll write it down in a second. And gestalt is, it's how all the different parts of drawing work together. So it's a combination of all the technical skills and how it creates an overall cohesive whole. So gestalt is the wholeness of your work. And for your final assignment for this first lesson, I want you to either choose the same still life or find a new one and implement all the practices, everything of the practices into it and try to show wholeness. So it's not accuracy, not perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to see a cohesive, comprehensive piece of work. So just thinking about what it makes, how to make work that fits, that does, and if it is discordant, think about why it is discordant, things like that. So that's your first lesson. Don't worry if you have to do multiple thumbnails for them. It's maybe a practice of ways of seeing things such as still lives and mundane objects and how they can improve your work. Okay, thank you. I'll see you in the next lesson. Goodbye.